know what you're about to listen to? The Coolville Urbanism Podcast. I'm your host, Michael colville-andersen. The conversation about urban cycling continues around the world. Reestablishing the bicycle as transport in our cities is more important than ever before. Through my work over the past 15 years, I never cease to be amazed at the network I have developed. It's as inspiring as it is humbling. Like anyone else, I myself need inspiration, and so many people I have met through my work continue to provide it. I continue to feed off of it. There are certain individuals, however, that go above and beyond when it comes to their passion for cities and for urban cycling. I was on a quick trip to Milan to speak at the Triennale about urban design. The night before, it was obvious what I was going to do. I was going to hang out with two good friends, a couple of go-to people whenever I'm in the city. As an increasingly intrepid podcaster, I had my recording gear with me, and I realized that there is a story that needs a wider audience. Pinar Pinzuti and her husband Paolo are two of the strongest voices for urban change through the bicycle in Italy, and have been for many years. They are an important influence in the conversation about making cities better. They master the art of communication and advocacy. We had drinks and dinner planned, but then I proposed to Pinar that we meet up beforehand to talk about one of her amazing projects that went off the charts around the world this year: the Fancy Women Bike Ride. For many years, Pinar has called herself a cycling brainwasher, doing everything she can to further the conversation about getting bikes back into our cities. Her energy and enthusiasm is contagious and addictive. We've known each other for many years. We share the same desire for change and have utilized many of the same tools. I usually try to record this podcast outdoors, with a cityscape as an audio background. That evening in Milan, however, was rainy, and it wasn't letting up, so we had to find an alternative location. We popped into the ADI Design Museum and sat down at a table with a glass of wine. It perhaps isn't the most podcast-friendly location. It was nearing closing time and the staff were cleaning up in the background. But imagine, if you will, that you're at the cafe of the Design Museum in Milan, at a table with Pinar and I, as we talk about the hows and whys of the Fancy Women Bike Ride, about the Chic movement that I started, and the importance of empowering women to embrace the bicycle. Normal bicycles, of course, which remains, despite amazing progress over the past 15 years, all the more challenging in what still is, by and large, a male-dominated, gear-fixated, spandex-clad cycling world. But hey, we have a secret weapon: Pinar Pinzuti and her fancy ladies on bikes. Okay, Pinar, on the 18th of September 2021, women all over the world dressed up in their finest clothes and rode bicycles, and it's your fault.
Yes, it is.
Tell me, let's just start with what the hell happened there.
This is Fancy Women Bike Ride, which is a grassroots movement of women on bicycles, which started in 2013 in Turkey, in Izmir, in my city where I was born, and grown in something that I cannot control anymore. So this year we were in 30 countries, more than 150 cities, because I cannot tell the exact number, because there are cities that are not really applying to us, but just hosting the event.
They just went for a bike ride. They heard about it and just got on their bikes.
They do that, like in India, for example, and like in Indonesia, and they just want to be the part of this bigger thing. It was a success this year because everyone just wanted to be outside, because last year we had to skip it, so no public mass rides, but only these smaller rides with friends. But this year it was a huge success.
So it was pent-up frustration around the world, of course, because of Corona and restrictions. So that was, they needed to get out, all these people, but it's also been growing in popularity through the years, hasn't it, since 2013?
Yes, correct. So 2013, it was a single event in the city of Izmir. And it was just, we created this Facebook event, and I want to mention this. We were looking for a picture of a lady on a commuter bicycle with casual clothes. We couldn't find one Turkish photo. We didn't have those photos. And so we took one from Copenhagen.
Was
So-
it my photo?
I think so.
Probably. I have 30,000 photos of people on bikes. You probably took it, yep.
So we knew about the cycle Chic, and so those images were already on Google Images. So we looked for a lady photo, and we used that photo to promote the event for that first ever women-only bicycle ride in Turkey. And then the photos of the event were all over the media, in TV and in newspapers. We received many messages from all around Turkey, from the ladies who wanted to host the event in their cities. In 2013 was the first event, and in 2014 we were already in 10 cities, hosting the event on the same day, almost at the same time. With the common message. And then after a couple of years, in 2016, I moved to Milan, and the event came to Europe.
Came with you.
Came with me, and then it was all over. I mean, now we are in all the continents.
Now, that's what's cool about it is, now I'm making it sound like I've never heard of it, right? Of course I've heard of it. We know each other, full disclosure. But
Yeah.
I think it's cool that it started in, if you don't mind me saying, an unlikely place.
Correct.
Izmir, right?
Yeah.
This kind of thing, like obviously Copenhagen with the Cycle Chic blog and all of that. But I mean, I think it's great that it started in a place like that and then exported itself to Europe, not the other way around, which has been the case with most of the bicycle movement, right? From Europe and then abroad.
Correct,
So, yeah.
correct. So, I mean, we were used to see the photos or the movements which were coming up from the European cities. We have never had such a beautiful event in Turkey. So it was very encouraging for the women in Turkey to see something was born in Turkey. So they embraced it and protected it. So I liked it very much. This is maybe the reason why this year we had these events in countries where cycling is not so popular. They say if they do it in Turkey, maybe we can do it here as well. So we were in Mexico, for example, in smaller cities, not Mexico City, but in smaller cities in Mexico, or in Indonesia. The first ever women event in India, in which they called it a milestone event, because it was the first time that women were in the streets to reclaim public space.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, I have a whole collection of vintage bicycle posters, some physical, many of them digital. I have one from India from 1970 for an Indian brand, and it is this, beautifully dressed Indian woman in the full Indian, clothing, standing there with a bicycle as a huge poster. So I'm wondering also, you said you couldn't find a photo from Turkey of a woman on a normal bike. Now, I've done some research with Egypt, for example, and all these archive photos where cycling was completely normal. I know it was the same in Turkey, right? I mean, you grew up there. Do you remember bikes when you were a kid, or do your parents remember riding bikes?
My parents.
Yeah.
I do not remember any grown-up person on bicycles from my childhood.
Really? Wow. Okay.
But my mother, yes. And she says that when they were going to school, they hardly found the place to park their bicycles, or in the evening when all the families were cycling to the open-air cinemas, that they couldn't find a parking spot for their bicycles. So this was Turkey in the 50s, where not everyone could afford to have a car, and the street or road infrastructure was not like today. So people were using bicycles, and then our cities were invaded by cars. Cheap, ugly cars.
Yeah. And we know how that worked
We
out.
know that.
Or didn't work out, really. Yeah. So what was the inspiration for starting Fancy Women Bike Ride? Like you got, the ideas appear in our heads. When did it appear in your head, and why?
It was, I started my cycling brainwasher career in 2006. I was the first female bicycle blogger of Turkey. I was writing in Turkish, in German, in English, and in Italian. Everything that I was learning about urbanism, car-free cities, 30-kilometer zones and everything. So everything I was learning, I was writing on my blog. So I knew the power of content, the digital content, placing the right word in the right space for the people who would look for that in the near future, I was hoping. And then one day, a neighbor of mine came to me and said she was 39 on those days. Sema said, yeah, I just learned how to ride a bicycle and I want more women to get in cycling. But the cycling world is so much male dominated, and from outsiders, it looks like if you don't have lycra, you cannot ride a bicycle. If you don't have legs, you are not a cyclist. If you don't have the latest carbon frame bicycle, you cannot participate to the cycling events. Can we please change it? And this was the face of cycling and the cyclists in Turkey in 2010, 2011. We wanted to show the community, especially our community in our city, that there was another face of cycling. And it was the best idea we had was, let's show it, let's do it in person. But if I ride on my own to work with my casual clothes, nobody spots me. But if we do in a mass, so the idea of critical mass, but in a fun way, with a smile on our faces, then maybe somebody would ask, what are these women are doing? So there was this Facebook event with your picture on the cover. And there we were inviting people with simple rules. This event had these 5 rules from the very beginning. You should participate with your own bicycles. I'm not going to give you a bicycle. So you should be able to cycle very slowly, and you have to wave your hand to the pedestrians that are looking very strangely to you. And the other one was smiling, because we knew that people will take photos of us and nobody likes her face, his face on a photo with, not smiling. So we said, after that event, if they see their beautiful pictures, maybe they would like to use it in social media, and maybe it would become their profile photo for the rest of the year. And somebody with that photo would see the bicycle in it. So it was product positioning, actually. So this was the idea. Our manifesto, the very first manifesto, I remember it, the first line, it changed in the years, of course, this manifesto and the messages. But the first line was, we want to cycle safely and with our casual clothes where we want to go, like in the Northern European countries.
Those are the 2 greatest. I didn't know you had those rules. You have to wave and smile. Like, those are the best rules ever, right? And
this is exactly the opposite. Think of any cycling picture on the mainstream newspapers. Those are 99% from a cycling competition event. Guys never smile. So they have this very tough face and cool face, and they want to show that they're suffering and sweating, and it's all about speed. So on the place of speed, we put the slowness, and on this cool face, the smile.
I wouldn't smile if I had to wear that spandex. I think I would just be sad. I would never smile. No, but okay, because I've seen all the photos through the years, Pinar, and yeah, it's all these women smiling and waving, but it's because it's 2 rules. That's awesome, but they're the best rules ever. Oh my God. So tell me about the name, because there's a lot of things to choose from. And is it Turkish? Like fancy women, like you translate it from Turkish? Or where did you get the name Fancy Women Bike Ride?
So the word in Turkish is much fancier than the word fancy in English. It is very provocative because it's the word süslü, which is a woman who's putting on so many things that it's almost ridiculous, actually.
Okay.
But this is not a word that we have given to ourselves in Turkey. So this was a terminology used by men to describe women which had too much makeup on or some colorful clothes on them. So we want to provoke that. Okay, you call me that, I want to be that. And let me show you how I can be so much süslü, so much fancy. In the first years, we were criticized by women, mostly by women. They said, I'm not fancy. I never wear fancy things, so am I not allowed to participate? And we said, you can come, you can wear anything you want, just be there. And if you want to be fancy, it's the perfect occasion, because nobody would point at you and say, how are you dressed actually? And then after 3 years, I had my first interview with an American magazine, and they asked me to translate a word, because they used the Google translator and they wanted to call the event Cycle Chic.
Cycle Chic?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Cycle Chic's bike ride, they called it. So if you Google it, you will find us. And I said, but Cycle Chic, the word chic is telling the woman that she has to dress chic, but there are so many women who do not have chic clothes in their houses. So we didn't want to give the woman the rule of how she should be dressing, but using her fantasy to decide what she wanted to wear. So it's not exactly the word in Turkish. And there's one thing I have to confess it for the first time. I Googled fancy woman 3 years ago, only the word fancy woman. And you know what that means? That it was used in the 30s in America.
What, in English you're talking about
Yes.
now? Fancy women in English.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't tell this. But anyways,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
going to tell it.
Do it.
So, yeah, I'm not a native, so I couldn't have known this. Fancy woman was used in the 30s in the United States for the woman who was the mistress of a married man.
Okay.
Yes. So my husband said to me, oh my gosh, you invented something with that name, like the horse ride or something. And I said, I was very sad. I mean, it was horrible for me. And then the next day I said, okay, it's again men telling women, calling them in that way. So I want to change the description, the meaning of that word. So it's now fancy woman.
That's great. But then I'm not worried for you, because if it was the 1930s, like I have never heard that expression ever, you know. So I think you're safe generally.
I know,
yeah.
Thank you.
Like people nowadays don't go around saying, "Oh, you have a fancy woman," meaning a mistress. Nobody knows this expression.
Yeah, but
there's a
it's
little
still-
window of time.
It's still my nightmare.
But it's still funny, though.
That
Come on.
an American journalist one day would come to me and ask me this question: how comes that you have chosen that name?
Oh, that's great. Now, I think I should say something about Cycle Chic there, because I talked to some friends and female friends when I made up the phrase many years ago. And chic is just well-dressed. I feel chic today in what I'm wearing, and I'm in Italy where I'm not chic compared to
No,
what
you're not. I was about to say,
No.
sorry, Michael, you're not.
But I mean, I think chic is what you make it. That was always in Danish anyway, and in my impression of it in English, chic is what you make it. Now that hashtag Cycle Chic has been totally hijacked by the spandex women out there, the bike racing spandex crowd. And you just see all this crazy spandex on their racing bikes. And whatever, it's the internet. You can't, I'm not going to go and start chasing after a hashtag. God. If they feel chic in their spandex, fine. Again, if they feel chic when they wear that, then that's great. If you feel chic wearing sweatpants and your slippers down to the supermarket on a Sunday with a hangover, great. Like, I don't think anybody, probably in America they have a different impression of the word, but I think in the European languages and in the UK, I think chic is just, pretty neutral. It's what you make it.
Okay, is this your interpretation? Because chic is elegant, actually.
Yeah, but then
It's not
I feel elegant
casual.
today, and you're telling me I don't look elegant. So, but you know what I mean?
You're
I think
casual. Come on.
it's casual, but I still, that's the interpretation of it, right?
Yeah.
I never ever thought about it as being fancy or super well dressed.
So, and in Cycle Chic, there's not only women, there's men as well.
Absolutely, men can be chic as well. So there was never any gender gender differentiation between men and women with the word chic. It's to sort of do it. I think Americans have had a little bit of a hard time with the word chic. Maybe for them, they think of Parisians walking down the street all blinged up with better clothes than any American will wear. And who cares? Like it also went global, right? So that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, that was, for example, now that you say cycle chic, I mean, I was also posting a lot of photos using that tag when it was really meant to be cycle chic. We didn't want, for example, the men participate to the event. That's why we put the word women in the event's title. And this also comes from when men were inside any event, in any cycling event in Turkey, they wanted to compete. And so it was all about, I'm going to arrive first at the final point, final destination. So we said, how can we take out the competition part from this event? And so we put the word women in it to encourage more women, also those who were not cycling every day, to find that safe space, in safety in numbers actually, because they were in a group ride, which had a distance of 3 kilometers. So Fancy Women Bike Ride, it's a huge event all around the world, but it is a show actually, because you start in the city center and you remain in the city center, because this is where we want to be seen. So if anybody comes to me and say, we want to host a ride in a park, I say, no, nobody would see you. I want you in Piazza Duomo or under the Tour Eiffel, for example. So that was the reason that we have taken out the men from our event, and we have always been criticized also for this decision. I have seen in these years, for example, that some men try to host the event secretly with a fake name in their city, because they thought they can do this better than we do. So any president of a cycling association, you know, those traditional ones with the yellow gilet.
Okay, the yellow vests, right? Yeah.
And so they were secretly hosting the event, and of course I was finding them out and seeing the rules like, yeah, you have to be chic. They were using the word chic, elegant, and with very expensive clothes. But at the end of the tour, they were also offering award for the best dressed up woman, or asking for a fee to participate to the ride. We are completely against it. For example, no competition, men cannot organize it because we don't want it in that way. If we go back to cycle chic, there are so many cities. If I look at Instagram,